Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Rowe. We're going to look at some Algebra 2A, Lesson 10, solving quadratics with complex solutions. And this is by using completing the square. So that's these last three problems of Lesson 10. Now, real quick, the process is real easy. Just take your time, follow the steps I'm about to give you. So if I'm given a problem like this that I know won't factor, because there's no factors of 5, it had to be 4. Then I need to use another method, whether it's completing the square or the quadratic formula. In this particular lesson, you're told you have to use completing the square. So the first thing we have to do is we have to isolate the x squared and the x term. So those have to be isolated. So that means I need to subtract 5 from each side. So make sure those cancel out. If you add 5 to each side, they won't cancel. So you have to subtract 5. So that's going to leave me with x squared minus 4x. And I'm going to leave a little space there. And it equals negative 5. So now here's the completing the square part. So to complete the square, we're going to take b, which in this case is negative 4. We're going to divide it by 2. That equals negative 2. And we're going to square that. So this is going to be negative 2 squared, so plus negative 2 squared. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, plus negative 2 squared. That way I'm adding the same thing to each side. So here's where we complete the square. So now, the reason we complete the square here is so that we can turn this into a quadratic, or not a quadratic, but a perfect square binomial. So this is going to be x minus 2 squared. Now, how do I know it's minus 2? Well, that's what this number is. That number will be the number that goes in the binomial. And on the other side, I've got negative 5 plus 4. So after I complete the square, I've got x minus 2 squared equals negative 1. So here, this is there's 2 more steps left. This is the easy part. We're going to take the square root of each side. The square root of x minus 2 squared is x minus 2. The square root of negative 1 is either positive or negative I. Remember, we're in Algebra 2 now, so we know the complex numbering system. So then the final step is to isolate x. We're going to isolate x by adding 2 to each side, and x is going to equal 2 plus or minus I. That, ladies and gentlemen, right there, that is the answer we are looking for. So isolate the x variables. So we want to, if it doesn't have an x, it's got to go to the other side. Complete the square by dividing b, which is in front of the x, by 2. And then we're going to square that and add it to each side. We're going to write that trinomial as a perfect square binomial. And then we're going to take a square root and solve. So that's the process. All right, so one more time, and then we're going to look at a problem each like number 6 and number 7. Okay, so again, step 1, get everything without a variable to the opposite side. So we're going to subtract 82. So that's going to leave me x squared minus 18x equals negative 82. I'm going to leave myself a little space so I can do my complete square. All right, complete the square. B is negative 18, so negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. So I'm going to add negative 9 squared to each side. Okay, write my perfect square. So this will be x minus 9 squared. Remember that 9 again comes from this number. And then negative 82 plus 9 squared, which is 81. So negative 81 and negative 82 plus 81 is negative 1. I'm going to square root each side. Okay, square root of x minus 9 squared is x minus 9. Now on the other side, we got positive or negative I. Remember, we can pull both of those roots out. Isolate x by adding 9 to each side. And finally, we get that x is going to equal 9 plus or minus I. Okay, so let's look at an example like number 6. So here's one like number 6. First thing you notice is that all of these are multiples of 2. So before we can complete the square, the other thing that's really important is that this coefficient be 1. So I've got to divide everything by 2. And I can divide that by 2 because whatever you do on one side, you do on the other. So we've got x squared plus 7x plus 23 equals 0. Okay, now we're going to isolate the x squared and the x, and we'll subtract 23 from each side. I think you've seen that twice now, so I'm just going to write down the answer. Leave myself some space. We get negative 23. Okay, so now we're going to take b, which in this case is 7, divided by 2. Well, I can't divide that evenly, so I'm going to leave it as 7 over 2. So we're going to add 7 over 2 squared. Over here, I'm going to go ahead and square it out. So that's going to be 49 over 4. And how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to make 23 into a fraction over 4. So 23 times 4 is 92. So this is going to become, I'm going to go ahead and write that perfect square there. This will be negative 92 over 49 plus, not 49, just a row. It's going to be 92 over 4. And we're going to add to that 49 over 4. I'm going to get my calculator, do a little bit of calculations here. You never want to use decimals because that's going to mess up how you simplify it. So keep the fractions. The fractions are not that difficult in this situation because you're always going to make it into a fraction over the number that you add. So in this case, I'm going to make it a fraction over 4. If it was some other number, I would make it a fraction over whatever that number is. So I'll do negative 92 plus 49. That gives me negative 43. We've got x plus 7 over 2 squared equals negative 43 over 4 square root each side. So we'll try to make some space here. X plus 7 over 2. Now, how do I square root a fraction? Well, the top is not a perfect square root, so I'm just going to leave it. So that's going to be positive or negative square root of 43. Because it's negative, I'm going to pull an I out. That's the square root of negative 1. Square root of 4 is 2. Now I'm going to add, or excuse me, I'm going to subtract 7 halves from each side. And so x is going to equal 7 halves plus or minus I times the square root of 43 all over 2. That is the final answer. Please do not try to use decimals. You're not going to be able to simplify it like I just did. And your answer needs to be a simplified radical answer. And don't try to take the square root of 43 with a imaginary coefficient. Okay, now this one's like number 7. Well, this isn't written like the other ones, Mr. Rose. So now what do I do? Well, I'm going to rewrite this in standard form. So one step to make that happen is I'm going to add x squared to each side. And so that's going to give me x squared plus 14x plus 99 equals 0. Because two things, the leading coefficient has to be positive and it has to be 1. I could have moved the 14 over with the x squared, but then I'd have had to divide by negative 1 to make it positive. So 2 steps either way, but I like it doing it this way better. So again, I'm going to isolate. I'm just going to write that step down. X squared plus 14x equals negative 99. We're going to complete the square. 14 divided by 2 is 7. I'm going to add 7 squared to each side. Okay, so I'm going to complete my square now. This is x plus 7 squared equals negative 99 plus 49. 49. That's going to give me negative 50. So I am going to take my square root now. Square root of negative 50. Square root of x plus 7 squared. So that's going to give me x plus 7. Now over here, I do have to do some simplifying. This is 25 times 2. That is a perfect square. So when I take my square root, I have to simplify my radical. So a 5 comes out of the radical. I comes out of the radical. And what's left inside the radical is a 2. And so final step, subtract 7 from each side. X is going to equal negative 7 plus or minus 5i times the square root of 2. And that, folks, is the final answer. I hope this helps you get through lesson 10. If it does not, please send me a teacher message and let me know what else you need. You can always make an appointment. So watch this several times if you need to. Don't watch it one time and think, oh, I've got it, and then kind of skip a step.